I'm Chad Kroeger. And just for the record, so you can tell the rest of the world, yes, it is actually Chad Kroeger. There you go.
Kroeger.
Mike Kroeger.
And that Ryan Peake.
Ryan Bickadall.
In 2001, a song called How You Remind Me propelled four good old country boys onto the world stage and into one of the biggest bands in the world.
It didn't matter where or when you saw them, you always knew that they were honing their craft, they were working on not just being Nickelback, but being performers. They were always trying to better themselves.
Chad just looked at it with a very critical eye and said, what is the number one way to success? How do I write a song people want to listen to and, you know, will make people want to buy that album? And I think they've lived off that ethic and it's done them well.
Nickelback emerged at a time when pop music dominated the music charts, and their back to rock and roll basics attitude was just what the world was waiting for.
It was really popular to kind of crap on them if you were in the college rock thing. You know, they didn't wear cardigans, they didn't have plastic rimmed glasses, you know, they were not as angst-ridden as they should have been.
A lot of bands that are up and coming right now tend to want things right now. You know, look how good I am. I should be, you know, I should be rich, I should be famous. But I don't ever feel that Nickelback did it to become rich or famous. That was just a product of their hard work.
But success didn't just happen overnight. Several lineup changes and millions of record sales later, Nickelback have travelled a very long road to international fame and fortune.
A lot of people look at it like they just came out of nowhere. But I've been building the band ever since the end of '95. And it's just that it was a building process to get a band recognized to the public.
I think they've worked pretty hard at it. I know they did a lot of touring in a van, but I think they worked smart too.
They were the breakthrough, and in that genre, I think it's kind of a declining, at least locally, you know, the hard rock kind of genre, it's a declining community, and they will forever be remembered as the kings of it.
When Debbie Kroeger gave her young son Chad a guitar, she had no idea the worldwide impact that he would eventually have on the rock music scene. Chad was 13 at the time and living with his mother and his older brother Mike in a town called Hanna in Alberta, Canada.
They always make a point of saying that they're from Alberta, which is important, I think, because a lot of times in the hard rock world, people turn to pretend they're from LA or pretend they're from New York, even though they just moved in from Iowa 6 months before, you know. But maybe that's part of the appeal, is that they're quite honest with themselves and with the fans about where they're from and where they're going and what they do. So.
Corb Lund is a renowned Canadian musician. Nickelback's drummer, Ryan Bickadall, is his friend and former bandmate.
You can get my $5 back. It's very frontiersy, I would say, compared to Eastern Canada or the Eastern US. It's still a little wild out here. It's kind of like the Wild West in a way. And it's very open geographically too. Like Alberta is like, you can drive for an hour and not see another human being, so it's very open. So we saddled up the ponies and we loaded up the gin road.
I mean, it's a ranching community, which is, you know, a strong work ethic, and you believe in what you do, and you don't let people get in the way. And I think perhaps that did matter because they had a sound, they knew what they wanted to play, and they were not a trendy band. I mean, it was really popular to kind of crap on them if you were in the college rock thing, you know. And yet, I do think that it made a big difference where they came from. I think the fact they settled in Vancouver was just because we have some population, Hanna doesn't, and it was a good base of operations for the West Coast, which was certainly, I think, where they saw their music going.
Double deal, son of a gun of a song, stealing, chicken eating, thief, and get my $5 back.
Chad, Mike, and their friend Ryan Peake did what most teenagers in Hanna did: drinking beer, following their local sports teams, and playing in bands. There wasn't a great deal to do in a small town like Hanna, so music was the obvious way to channel their creative energy.
Hard to believe, you know, that three kids from Hanna that really had, you know, no big help in Hanna could make that kind of jump into the world like that. I think it's great for them, and I think it's good for all our kids, because it doesn't matter whether it's music or anything else. You can say, hey, look, these guys, look where they are, and look where they came from. And I think if our kids realize that if you want it, and they wanted it, I mean, you got to give them that. They wanted it, and they worked hard when they were here, but they really didn't have any big help here. It was just them.
You know, sometimes kids here feel that we're a long way from the city and we don't have as many recreational opportunities as kids in the city. But if you really believe that you can do something, you can do it.
And certainly they've introduced, we must have 8 more groups around here that are all trying to make it, and it's, you know, I'd say 100% because of them.
The Kroeger brothers are from a musical background. As teenagers, Chad and Mike would fill their mother's house with the sounds of rival guitar playing from their bedrooms. Ryan played trombone and piano before borrowing his brother's guitar and playing in as many local bands as possible. Between gigs, the boys would fit in time to go to school.
One of my memories of Chad is in the mornings, quite often he was late in the mornings, and I would have to give him a call and just say, "Good morning, Chad, it's Mrs. Wecker, it's time to come to school." Sometimes I wouldn't even have to say who I was, and he'd just say, "I'm coming," or "I'm on my way." He was lots of fun, always, you know, pulling a few pranks now and then, and sometimes he didn't always want to do what he was told, but his brother was always there to sort of help him and get him on track.
I think Mike was very quiet. He probably, of the 3 of them, probably was the least obvious in the school. Chad had a pretty good group of friends, and if he didn't have them as friends, he certainly had no problem talking to them or, you know, getting them going, whether he just got them going for a reason or not. And Ryan sort of had the both groups. He had the group that the guys hung around with, plus he had the athletic kids that he hung around with also.
Certainly in Chad, you could see that he was either going to succeed on a grand scale or not succeed on a grand scale. His brother at the time seemed to sort of follow Chad, I think, and Ryan was a pretty good student. At the time when he was in junior high, I didn't really know that he was interested in music, but you could tell that Chad was going on to something somewhere. I don't think at the time we knew the scale that it would be.
Every Halloween, we used to have a joke, Chad and I used to wear the long stringy hair and the glasses and do my Chad Kroeger impersonation. He'd be very upset with me because I couldn't do it very well. And I remember they were awesome in doing assignments in English and stuff where they got to do their own. I think they did a thing out of the graveyard, if you can believe it. And they actually went in and pretended to be in a grave, and they did a thing on Hamlet, and it was amazing. I saw the video of it, and they did some music with it and everything else. I think that was the biggest thing that I remember from them. Chad was in the hallway a lot, so I got to see him a lot.
Quite a few years ago, at the parent-teacher interviews, Mrs. Kroeger came in inquiring how her boys were doing, and she was quite concerned about Chad because school wasn't exactly his thing in a big way, and his marks weren't very good, and she sat across from me in the interviews, and we looked at his marks, and she shook her head, and she said, I'm not really sure what's going to become of Chad. School doesn't seem to be for him, but when a song comes on the radio, he can pick it out on his guitar right away. And I remember that clearly because it was a foreshadowing of what was to become on a much larger scale.
Chad and Mike recruited their cousin Brandon to play on drums. One of their bands was The Village Idiot, making a name for themselves at the few venues Hannah had available, performing Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Pepper covers. Although Hannah was home, Chad, Mike and Ryan were restless. They couldn't really fulfill their dreams and ambitions there, and Vancouver was the place to be.
I think the Vancouver music scene has a lot to offer. I think grunge started in Seattle, and Seattle, you know, got put on the musical map because of grunge. And depending on who you talk to, Mother Love Bone, or was it Nirvana, or was it Pearl Jam, or was it a combination of all of them, or was it early Soundgarden? It didn't matter. It wasn't a band, it was a sound, it was a time, and that was Seattle. But now when you look at Vancouver, you look at bands like Default, and there's Theory of the Dead Man, and obviously there's Nickelback, and there's Matthew Good, and there's Biff Naked. And some of these bands and names might not mean anything to you, but I can assure you that they're all world-class talents. I don't think there's a quintessential Vancouver sound, but if there was, Nickelback is defining it right now, and I would tell anybody who's a fan of great music, when you come to the left coast, make sure you see Seattle, but don't forget about Vancouver.
Mike moved to Vancouver first and was amongst the many musicians who used to sleep at the Rubber Room, an old rehearsal space.
At least 50, 60 people, musicians, used to live in this place. Through all the nooks and crannies, little cupboard, and here's a person, there's a person sleeping. And all it was about was jamming. Mike used to play with a band before. It was Black Dogs of Depression. And Mike obviously played bass in that band. Excellent band. They were really going places and stuff like that. And Chad moved out and Mike left that band and started jamming with his brother.
Well, I knew Mike somewhere probably in '95, and he probably approached me at the end of '95 with that tape of the band, which they didn't have a name at the time. And I heard 5 songs that they had on demo, and I felt one of the songs was radio friendly, which was called Fly.
Mike started to work in a local Starbucks coffee house, and subconsciously the name Nickelback was soon in the making.
The coffees that he was selling were coming up to about $1.95 or $1.45 amounts, and so people would be paying in $2 or $1.50 amounts, in which case he'd have to give them a Nickelback. And so he ended up saying, "Here's your Nickelback," quite often when he worked here, and it sort of stuck with him when it came time to name the band.
They scraped together as much money as they could and recorded and independently released their first EP, Hesher, in February 1996.
The first video that Nickelback came about was the song Fly, which actually got picked up from Pyramid Productions on a film called Horsey, which actually they played quite a bit of it in the movie. Fly got a lot of attention around as far as people looking at it as a radio-friendly song, so it was a lot of people wanted to use it. And we started putting the songs on soundtracks, like series like Highlander, EA Sports. And after that, we started moving up in the world.
The band was tireless in their self-promotion, calling radio stations day after day, until local network C Fox championed the Nickelback cause. Jeff O'Neill was the first DJ to put Nickelback on air.
We like to promote the local bands here in Vancouver, and Nickelback was, a young band, a new band that had never been on the radio before. So they used to come into the Fox studios in the evening show when I was working and hang out with me, and they bring their instruments down and perform and stuff like that. I heard about Nickelback through our Seeds program, so it was for young up-and-coming bands to try and break out, and Nickelback obviously broke out. They won our contest that year, and they basically performed 4 nights a week, every week for the first 2 years.
Nickelback has always struck me as a band with a work ethic. And I think also their timing is good. They were the right band for the right time, and it helped them a lot. The radio station became very confident, I think, of the fact that the band was there to make it. They were very serious about their career. And consequently, that seriousness engendered confidence. And from that confidence, things just accelerated.
These guys work. The thing that people need to appreciate about Nickelback is that they had a work ethic that was incredible right from the start. They sold something in the realm of 60,000 copies of their album as an independent group, which is unheard of in Canada. That's almost platinum in this country. And they did it by flying out. One of them would fly out to Montreal and he'd ride around with a rental car full of records and sell them at indie stores and push gigs, and they did everything. Like Chad would be sitting at home answering calls, setting up tours. Girlfriends would be doing posters. Everybody was working as a unit, and when they brought that into what they did as a band when they were signed, so they cut a good deal, put it all together. I mean, that matters a lot to do that.
Nickelback signed a deal in early 1997 with Toronto-based independent label Shoreline Records, the label's first signing.
I think there was a practice years ago where you had to, if you were a band and you wanted to perform at certain clubs, you would have to go out and sell tickets. The promoter wouldn't put you on stage, or the owner wouldn't put you on stage unless you could guarantee 300 people would be in the seats. And when you're an unknown band up and coming, it's really hard to sell 300 tickets. So I think Nickelback ate a few of those tickets and paid for them themselves. They can afford to do it now, but back then they really, they did whatever it took to get noticed and to become better musicians and better people.
Their first album, Curb, was a reworking and extension of Hesher and was recorded at Turtle Studios in White Rock. Larry Anshall has worked with numerous bands, including Pearl Jam, Soundgarden and Bryan Adams, and was an obvious choice to help develop the Nickelback sound.
I first heard of Nickelback when their song Fly began to get some local attention on CFOX radio, and it was a catchy song. The first time I heard it, actually, I thought it might be an early Nirvana song that I hadn't heard before. But it was a local band, and it was really good. That's why I thought it might be early Nirvana. It was really catchy and well written, but quite rough. I first met them through their managers, Terry Cuddleford and Clyde Hill, because I had produced another band called Jar for Amar Management, which was their company. And the guys in Nickelback had heard that album, and I knew that they liked it. And I invited them to come into my studio for a day of live off the floor recording just to hear their songs. Well, they wanted to sound heavy. They definitely wanted a deep, heavy sound. And I had a reputation for this by the time I had worked with the band. I was in a lot of heavy bands, and they liked this. I felt I could help refine Curb so they would come across as professional, a tighter unit than they had previously sounded on their self-produced EP Hesher, which was recorded only a few months before Curb. We set out a schedule of about 10 days to record, and I was help them produce their music. And we basically started from the arrangements and rebuilt their songs and chopped some down. Some were a little bit long, and through gaining their trust and throwing out some good ideas, we really stripped it down to the basics and then built up their music again. And I was involved in coaching their performances and adding ideas and just basically becoming a fifth member of the band for the project. In this day and age, playing live is really important because with all of the studio techniques that people have at their fingertips, it's really easy to make a really good sounding record, but it's not as easy to be able to pull off a good rock and roll live show, and these guys do it. So.
Today, Nickelback sells out venues around the world, but it wasn't always like that. To develop their fan base, they toured endlessly, travelling for miles in a van and supporting countless bands.
There's been days when we're on tour. I mean, we just finished 18 months straight, and there was days where I was like, I can't go out and do another set. Like, I can't play the set one more time. And that's more like just like a work thing. Because when we get out there, it's either you're gonna give it everything you got or you're not, and that's all there is to it. And so it's like a workout. If some days you just don't feel like working out, you know what I'm saying? And
but you have to do it.
But you have to do it. And that's one thing about us. That's like when we get up there, we can't fake it. You either got to get into it or just don't. So and we don't really have a choice. We can't not do it. So we just got to look forward to working out every day.
The clubs we did around town was Studebakers, which that was their first headliner show, which they were scared to death. They were scared to come out of the dressing room, thinking it was going to be a flop. So it's like, you know, Chad would stick his head out and see that wasn't too many people there, and he said, well, I told you we wasn't ready. I said, man, sit down and relax. I said, I'm handling this, right? So 10:30 coming around, half full. He didn't stick his head out yet. And then maybe 20 minutes later, the room was full, and he stuck out and started smiling. So they had a whole room full of people to play in front of.
There's a number of clubs that they used to play a lot. They used to play the Gate quite often, which isn't around anymore. They played the Starfish, which is a pretty famous club here in Vancouver, but that's not around anymore. But the biggest and most famous club would be the Town Pump, and I think that's probably where Nickelback really learned a lot of their stage presence, and that's where the quintessential Vancouver Nickelback fan found the band. The Town Pump was a place where Nirvana played there, Pearl Jam played there, Soundgarden's played there. You name a band, they played there. Small club down in Gastown in Vancouver. It's not there anymore. It's a dance bar now, unfortunately. It's a little piece of Vancouver history that we all miss. But the basement was dingy. You could be sick in the corner of a room and nobody would really notice. It was that sort of place. Any and every band that went through there signed the walls. And I remember seeing Eddie Vedder's signature down there, and it's really trippy to sit there and look at that. And you know what? Before it shut down, Nickelback's signature was all around it as well. But it was a great club that would hold probably 350, maybe 400 or 500 if you really squeezed people in there. And the Town Pump is probably, for those people who went to that club, the best club that this city ever saw. If you lived in Vancouver in 1995, chances are went to the Town Pump, and you were probably lucky enough to see Nickelback in their infant stages.
One of the bars that Nickelback very commonly frequented was a bar called Studebaker's, located in Burnaby, British Columbia, and was sort of one of those rock bars full of, you know, aged 30-year-olds who are still playing the music that they played in the 80s. Whereas Nickelback fit in being a fairly hard-edged sound, but definitely stood out, you know, due to musical competency, if nothing else. Their highlight of their set in their very early days was they did a really mean cover of the song Even Flow by Pearl Jam. And I remember it was so spot on that I was so impressed by their musicianship at the time that, you know, it was a draw. So I returned, you know, time and time again. And from there, they basically started doing their own thing.
We used to rehearse at their house in the basement. So they rehearsed, actually they can rehearse every day. Sometimes they rehearse when rehearsal wasn't scheduled, because it's so convenient. They could just walk downstairs and start writing songs, and Chad used to just lock himself in the room and write the songs, and then he'll come back to the group and they'll put it together. Yeah, they rehearsed a lot because I used to always grade the shows. I used to walk around the club and see if anybody tapping their feet, or if anybody is into the band nodding their head. One show it didn't happen, so after 5 songs, you haven't captured the audience. You got to change something. So I always had them with a couple of cover tunes, like from Pearl Jam, because they used to do Pearl Jam cover, and Chad sounded like him at the time. So I say, play that Pearl Jam after the 5th song, and the people, like, you know how you play, and then you end the song and you hear people talking. You don't have that crowd. So that went off for 5 songs. I said, oh, we're in trouble. So I ran to the stage, play that Pearl Jam. So they played it. Next thing you know, the dance floor went like that. So I said, now hold them there. So they played, I think, 2 covers, and then went back to the originals, and people got into it.
I think the charisma that Chad shows as he's a very strong lead singer. He's very strong on stage. I remember seeing Nickelback years and years ago, and I remember watching Chad on stage. He used to have drinks beforehand, kind of thing, have some fun beforehand, but he would swear a lot, and it was his nerves coming through. He could perform as a singer and as a songwriter. He could do all that very well. It was the conversation in between.
I used to go to that rehearsal and help put their shows together. As far as Chad speaking and talking to the audience, he was pretty bad.
People can be rude, people can be mean, and you'll get a lot of hecklers and stuff. So you tend to try and throw it back, and Chad could swear. And I'm not saying that he was very bad about things or whatnot, but you kind of knew that that was the one angle that Chad could work on. And it seemed that overnight, he wasn't the small town Chad anymore. He was the big time Chad.
He didn't know what to say to the audience, so I would try to rehearse them as where we would run 3 songs together so he don't have to talk so much. Run 3 songs and he'll speak a little bit and then run 3 more, and that way it's less talking, right? And so then he could think of something or develop himself into learning how to, speak to a crowd.
And when you talk to him now, you can see that he's well versed in the interview and he's very aware of what's going on. He's very seasoned. And for a young man to be as talented and as huge as he is right now, it's just a testament to the amount of work that he put into it.
They've come a long way since the days of travelling around in that one van. They were on the road for 18 months when they released Silver Side Up, and now have even had a studio installed on one of their many tour buses.
Waking up in your own bed is a great feeling, for sure.
Although we still have to sleep with a generator next to our bed, just to get to sleep.
Just to mimic the sound of the tour buses.
Yeah, the buses.
Yeah.
Soon, the draw of family life back in Alberta became too much for Brandon, and the band were left looking for a new drummer.
I believe the cousin was getting a lot of pressure from his wife as far as taking care of bills, because at the beginning, there's no money for the bands, period. You're just doing promotional gigs to get your name out. So Brandon couldn't hang that long because he had to take care of his wife, so he had to go back to Hannah and start working.
Mitch Gandow took over briefly before Ryan Peake suggested his old friend Ryan Vickerdal. Nick, as he's affectionately known, had been performing in various bands for years. They had finally found the missing piece of the puzzle.
Well, for me it was strange. I was dealing with it from a logistical sort of standpoint because I was sort of trying to schedule shows with my band with Ryan, so pretty soon he started off going to Vancouver to make a demo, and then he was going up for some shows, and pretty soon he was out there every other weekend, and then I started to figure out that something was pretty big was happening. So, and then you started to hear him on the radio, and it took off like a rocket. So
Ryan, the Peake, the guitar player, he found him. I think they was friends before in Edmonton, and I think it had to be something serious for him to just leave Edmonton to come down. So I think it was at the time where they brought him down. I think it was right before they recorded The State, which is the CD, the album that opened up the doors for them in the States.
Well, he's extremely focused in a musical way. He's different than, say, Chad, because Chad is very musical, but he's obviously very focused from a business standpoint as well. But Ryan is extremely focused as a musician. He's one of the most dedicated practitioners that I know. Even ever since I've known him, he's played 6 or 8 hours a day whenever he's at home. So he's and I don't think he ever viewed it as like, oh, I've got to make it big, but his motivation was always to be a better player, which is really cool, I think.
When the band needed a video for their increasingly popular song Leader of Men, they turned to award-winning filmmaker David Vaseboard.
Well, the producer had seen my documentary, Juicy Danger Meets Burning Man, and she liked it. It was a road film, it was really funky, it had some really wild characters in it. Just Flame, this guy who juggles chainsaws, a woman who has a flamethrower, I mean, just crazy stuff. They loved it, and they wanted to get that kind of energy into their video. The first problem we had was no money. There was absolutely no money. I mean, if there was money, it was a couple of $1,000s. And I'd done some location scouting with the producer. We went to some big warehouses and some airplane hangars and all that kind of stuff. But then we looked at the money and said, there's no way we're going to have any money to go anywhere. So I told the band, look, if you're going to do it, let's do it in your living room. Or let's do it in your house. Let's make it a garage video. And then we'll at least get a little bit of production value for what we spend on this thing. So they said, sure, what can we do? Right here. In the living room, the basement, the backyard, the front yard. I mean, it's going to look like it's going to look like East Vancouver. It's going to look gungy, but that's where you are right now as a band. You're on your way up, but you're still, you know, paying your dues. And I think it was Chad's idea that he'd answer the phone, he'd get pissed off, and he'd rip the phone out, and he'd throw it into the backyard, and then there's a line in the song that says, turn your television off. So maybe you'd take the TV and throw that out too. So that all sort of got more and more involved until we thought, okay, maybe the house is full of electronics and crap, and all that stuff gets hucked in the backyard. It becomes a big pile, and then they, you know, put gasoline all over it, and the whole thing blows up into flame, and it's like Burning Man in East Van. When they saw the fireballs going up, the neighbors called the police and said, and I quote, because the policeman said, the neighbors have said they've seen balls of flame rising out of your backyard. And I said, yes, officer, there were balls of flame, but this is a video shoot for a band called Nickelback, and we're really just finished. We're wrapping up, and we're going home now, and there won't be any more problems. And it happened to be a woman, and she was very nice, and she said, okay, as long as you're cleaning up, fine. Yeah, it was quite a scene. I mean, can you imagine, like a pile of toxic plastic burning out of control in your backyard. Now, the reason why it was out of control is that we'd run out of propellant. We'd run out of, you know, extinguisher. And it was supposed to be, the effect was supposed to be, we had all these tubes and stuff underneath built into this pile of stuff. And the tubes were full of force-fed propane. So once you opened up all the valves, the propane would float out. Christine Taylor, who was the firewoman on it, the nurse, would hit her flamethrower. It would ignite the flames, and boom, it would all go up. We'd shoot for a few minutes and then turn off the gas. It was cold out though, like today. The pipes froze, and the next thing you know, we were pouring real gasoline all over it and then lighting it, which was not the original intention, and it got out of control. It was almost a disaster, really. I mean, we had one day, we had like 50 extras. No one was getting paid. No one was, I don't know, the food was lousy. I mean, what could you afford to do? They remade Leader of Men after I made it. I mean, they must have had scads of money. And they actually employed one of the first ideas Chad had. And one was a kind of a Leader of Men qua Christ figure thing, where he'd end up elevating up, like levitating, and you know, he's got that gold hair, and he'd be kind of Christ-like. And no, they did it. I mean, it's huge money, and they did that in the second one. That just, budget for that, don't have it. I think Chad was a little worried it would all come together near the end of the day. I think he was wondering, is this really gonna work? Because there was just so much chaos. But everyone was great to work with. It was a great day of shooting, and it was a lot of fun.
Nickelback parted company with Amar Management and Clyde Hill in 1998. Soon after, Roadrunner Records snapped them up. Superstar status was beckoning with each day.
I think the real standout, there was some point around New Music West Festival a few years back, and I remember Nickelback played a headline show at the Starfish Room, and it was packed, and it was going off, and people were so into the band, and the band was so tight, and they were so loud, and they were so solid, and it was just, I remember sitting there nodding my head and thinking, okay, yeah, they've arrived. They've definitely arrived, and they're going to go places. And that was the year they inked the deal with Roadrunner, I guess, at that point. And it's pretty much been uphill ever since.
I think when Nickelback released The State, and they had that raw energy and that drive, You knew watching them on stage. There was a time when they played at the Commodore Ballroom, and it seemed like the week before they played, they could have played to 300 people, and then all of a sudden, within the span of a very short period of time, they weren't playing to 300 anymore. They were selling out the Commodore, which is about 1,200, and now they could never play the Commodore. They're just too large.
Leader of men. I returned from a 2-year absence in England. They had gone from a bar band to getting a modest amount of success and starting to headline small Canadian festivals. I saw that video, I heard that album, and I thought in 2 years they've come this far. You know, no one expected them to go as big as they did, but you knew that they were on the right track and that if they could keep it up, they were going all the way.
But I think the defining moment for them came when they, released The State. I think The State was just a giant record. Now, it wasn't as big with worldwide sales as Silver Side Up was, but when The State came out, that was, I think the boys knew, and the people that knew them as well knew that these guys are going places.
The very first time I saw them, actually, was New Year's Eve. They opened for Kiss. By that time, The State was out, and they'd received a lot of airplay. And even though I think a lot of the people at the show didn't really know Nickelback, the way the band conducted themselves presumed that people had heard of Nickelback.
I was flipping through the TV one day, and there was this concert scene, and these, the name Nickelback was in 20-foot letters behind the screen. I went, oh, okay, these guys are really big.
It was kind of an un-Canadian behavior in that, Canada, the rock bands tend to be a little bit more self-effacing, a little bit more modest about what they do. But Nickelback were on that stage like it was their stage. It might have been Kiss's show, but for the 30 or 40 minutes that Nickelback was on, it was their show and their stage. And I kind of liked them for that.
Their third album, Silver Side Up, was home to the track that would make the Boys from the Prairies a household name. Released in September 2001, it sold over 1 million copies in America in 1 month, and the song How You Remind Me became an anthem for a new generation. It was the most played single on American radio in 2002, and in 1 week it set a record for being played over 3,000 times.
I'm a fan of the song. I still like it. I mean, I'm lucky I actually like the song. Otherwise, I'd be wanting to shoot myself, I guess, the amount of times we've actually played it. But no, we're looking forward to doing it tonight.
Well, they did the pre-production 6 weeks of rehearsal here for Silver Side Up. They just brought everybody in and, come upstairs, listen to this. What do you think of this song? And, yeah, they just feel there was a good vibe going on with these guys for sure.
Everybody hits a point in time where they just have the song, they have the hook, they have the moment, and Chad's there. I remember interviewing him before Silver Side Up came. They were on tour with Creed, and then he just said, I've got this song, I've got this thing, and he hums me this chorus, and it was the chorus for How You Remind Me, and he just goes, I know, it's perfect. And I've got a couple more songs. He goes, I'm just hitting this stride. And now he's there, and I mean, he of all people is the most honest about it. He just goes, it's my moment, it's time, we're just another modern rock band, we're not the greatest band. He thinks there might be a great song or two in there. I think there probably is, maybe there are a couple already, but we'll see.
The first time that we toured England this year, we'd been hearing How You Remind Me all the time over here in Canada and the States, and the first gas station we went to in Britain, sure enough, it was playing on the radio, so it's still a bit surreal, it's everywhere, but more power to them. I mean, it's still a bit surreal because, I'm play music myself, so I know what it's like to play for an audience and to have people recognize you and all that stuff. But yeah, those guys are at 3 different levels from where I'm, and it's insane.
Sort of being able to travel around the world and play our music and have people know the words. I mean, truly, we can go to Japan, we can go to Australia, we can go to Europe, and everybody seems to know who we are, and I think that's a good thing.
Not Just Another Music Shop is one of Nickelback's favourite haunts when they come back to Vancouver. But not even famous rock stars can always have everything they want.
Chad always covets the vintage, like 1960s Gretsch, country gentleman, Tennessee Rose, hollow bodies like George Harrison used to play. That's his favorite guitar. He's always yapping about Gretches when he comes in here. Where's Gretsch? Where's Gretsch? We do have one here now, and I'm going to tell him to come and buy it right away because it's really nice. But that's the one thing that they're always looking for when they come in here. One of my favorite times with Chad in the store was when he was trying out this wah pedal with cowboy boots on, and it wasn't working out for him at all. And he kind of got frustrated and said, we don't need this. But it was really because of the boots.
The truth be told, they're extremely nice guys. You know, they have every right to be egotistical jerks, and they're not.
They realize that where they are, they're lucky to be there, and they've just maintained really good ethics and left ego behind, and it's about the music for them, and they love what they do, and I think it's really commendable that, you know, they behave in such a fashion.
They haven't changed at all, really. They're driving nice cars and that now, but you know, they haven't changed. They still talk, you know, they'll stop and talk to you and ask you how you doing, and they're just good people. They are.
They have better haircuts than they did then. I mean, their haircuts really improved. Actually, quite soon after the video, they started looking much better. They're probably eating better too, you know. And they're not as skinny as they used to be, although I guess it's hard to stay skinny, you know, if you're eating a lot of rich food and traveling around the world and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
You can tell they're rich. They just have an air about them now, you know. That's unavoidable, but they're still in jeans and t-shirts, which I think is true to their prairie upbringing. They're just sort of good, you know, down-to-earth, good old country boys.
One of the biggest moments in Chad's life was when he said, you know, hey, you know, it's just I was able to buy a house, and you know, he was out there helping his brother build a fence on some hobby farm property he purchased. I mean, it's like that was exciting to him. It's like, I got enough money to be able to do this. I have to do a crappy day job. You know, we're not riding in the same van. We've got a truck now, stuff like that. What's not to like about that? I mean, they're decent people.
They have a presence when they walk into the room, but you'd expect them to have egos that are out of control, but they're not at all. They're very cool guys. They're very mellow, good old Albertan boys from the prairies that just want to play guitar.
What I've noticed in Nickelback is that they've come into themselves. I think that if they have changed, it's only for the better, but I think they've matured as musicians and as people. They haven't really lost that small hometown kind of feel, even though, you know, they've sold millions of records. They've, you know, performed in every country around the world. They're very well known. But, you know, when you sit down with the guys away from the lights and away from the cameras and away from the microphones, they're just regular, normal guys. I golf with Mike whenever we can. Ryan Vicdahl, who's just an awesome guy. It's fun to talk to him about his, you know, just about normal things and to see the excitement that he has.
They invited us all out to Chad's place. He's got this acreage out on a farm with all-terrain vehicles and hills and hot tubs and such. And they had tiki torches burning everywhere and bartenders throwing bottles in the air. It was a total classic rock and roll movie party. And Chad was there welcoming everybody and with his flowing hair and getting everybody drinks and people in the pool and girls in bikinis. It was fantastic. Rock and roll, very loud. And he actually brought out a chainsaw and cut a section of his balcony out that overlooks the pool off of the second floor of his house, and people were jumping off of the balcony into the pool. He cut the railing off in front of everybody. That was I felt like a pretty good rock moment there.
All right, well, the winner is How You Remind Me by Nickelback.
Finally, their hard work began to pay off, notching up 4 Billboard Awards, 4 Juno Awards and 4 Grammy nominations in 2002. Those small-town boys were giving the big-time players a real run for their money.
We gotta thank Billboard. Thank you guys so much. We've got to thank all you guys who called the radio station and requested that song. Thank you so much. Give yourselves a round of applause.
The Junos are sort of the Canadian version of the Grammys, sort of the National Music Awards. And last year, Nickelback won a number of them, I think, and my band was also nominated for Best Roots Album, I think, and Ryan was actually on that record. So I'm not sure I think that might be unprecedented that an artist that has been nominated in two completely, utterly different bands for Juno. So good for Vicodel. One time in Vancouver, last time we played Vancouver, Ryan Peake got up with us too and played mandolin on a couple songs with Vicodel. So yeah, we had half Nickelback playing with us, playing country music. Yeah.
So to compare Nickelback's album sales in the United States to other generational rock bands of the last decade and a half, Nirvana's Nevermind, which came out in '91, reached 10 million sales in '99. So it took a full 8 years to reach that number. Nickelback's already past the halfway mark there in just 2.5. Likewise, Pearl Jam's 10 reached 11 million sales in 8 years as well. And so Nickelback is sort of on the road potentially to sort of being a career band, which I think is ideal for them. That's something they would like to see happen, is sort of establish themselves a bit of a legacy, sort of their own slice in the rock and roll legacy of career rock bands.
With money and success came a certain amount of freedom. Chad took time out from Nickelback to perform Why Don't You and I on guitar legend Carlos Santana's album Shaman. Chad also recorded Hero, the award-winning title track to the Spider-Man movie, in 2001.
I mean, most Nickelback songs have to do with life, and life has a lot of depressing topics. And I mean, we enjoy being a band that likes to touch on very sensitive issues. So we like to leave a lot of the interpretation up to the listener. That way we don't ruin it with our interpretation.
I think their success is based on a number of things, ambition, musical ability, obviously, and really good management. And that would be within the band themselves. I think they know where they're going, and if they're really big, it's because they put themselves there.
I mean, there's always a bit of black magic involved in voodoo involved in popular music success, but I think a big part of it is Chad's focus and his motivation and his talent at what he does. And I mean, I guess I'm biased, but I think that Vicodel is a big part of it too, because I think he's an excellent drummer. And I've actually seen a lot of shows that they've played and shows that they've played at festivals and other sort of radio bands at their ilk, and in my opinion, Nickelback is much better live than most of the radio bands, and I think a lot of that has to do with the rhythm section.
I would specifically look at Chad as the grand mastermind, and I think the more control he has, the more he's getting exactly what he wants, and he seems to be an expert at providing what the public wants to hear. And I think, basically, if he keeps that up, he'll be able to continue doing what the world wants to be listening to.
I think Nickelback are probably a product of the music scene in Vancouver as much as they are their relationships with the people that are in the music industry, not just in Vancouver, but in Canada and throughout the US. I think as a young band, touring and playing those clubs that aren't very forgiving to fans that don't really know you, you can't help but either fold or grow from it. And I think Nickelback did grow from it. And I think that you take a little piece of knowledge from wherever you play, whenever you play. People say that you learn something every day. And I would venture a guess that wherever Nickelback is tonight, they're probably going to pick up a little bit of knowledge and they're going to get that much further ahead.
They're just a very resilient band. You have to be when you become that huge and receive as much backlash as adoration as they do. They do. Let's face it. As many albums as they sell, they're also one of the most derided bands in the entire world. They are one of the biggest punchline bands out there. People love to hate Nickelback, and yet they still move on because they realize how hard it was to get to where they are, and they're not going to let anybody take it away from them necessarily without a fight.
It's not something that we just sit back and just bathe in, we just kind of, it's just sometimes little moments. when you see somebody singing the words to your song. You're just looking down and you're playing, and all of a sudden somebody's just like so involved. And sometimes I think back to when, I still go to concerts and do the same thing. But when I was growing up, listening to bands, and I'm just like, just singing the songs as loud as I can, losing my voice the next day when I go back to school, and just like, I'm sure James Hetfield was like looking our way and throwing stuff right at me.
One of the main things, Chad, I'll put this particularly on him, is he's analyzed the format of how to write, a successful song, and he's really taken the best elements of hit music for the last 10, 20 years and taken little snippets from all these different bands, combine them into one, song, which he rewrites in different ways, but he knows how to write what will stick in your head.
I think they've worked pretty hard at it. I know they did a lot of touring in a van, but I think they've worked smart too. Like, they've worked hard, but they've done the right things too. Like, I think Chad's pretty tuned into the business.
They probably have grown based on their relationships. They can thank a lot of the early bands that they played with and a lot of the people that they associated themselves with. And they're smart. And you add it all together and, with their talent, that's where they are.
Speak to me like I'm a fool. Haven't felt like that since school.
In January 2003, Chad formed 604 Records in Vancouver, named after the city's telephone area code, and began to nurture new Canadian talent.
604 Records, it's an imprint that's already got a ton of success. I mean, Chad's got an ear for Chad-type bands, but default Theory of a Dead Man in Canada, these bands are doing very well, and there's more to come.
Their fourth album, The Long Road, was released in September 2003 and hit the top of the charts all round the world. It was produced by the band at Chad's recording studio at his home in British Columbia, far away from the pressures of the record company.
They were like, guys, we really, we need the material to be pretty much finished by such and such a time, and then 2 days before such and such a time. Yeah, we're probably going to need a 2-week extension. Ultimate Frisbee Championships are coming up here.
Yeah.
Just mowed it into the field.
Yeah. Then the A&R reps would come out to Vancouver to see if we were actually doing any work. And that's when we had the Bellini machine on hand. So as soon as they'd show up, we'd have one of these. And they were okay with that.
So you can't rush creativity. We had a week left, and we had 2 songs done.
Yeah.
So, we stuffed the rest of the album that last week.
Yeah. Those people who say you
we
can't
can rush
it
creativity.
are wrong.
Inspiration can be manufactured.
I mean, I think Chad knows what he wants. So I think at the beginning of any band's career, there's always a political angle to part of your choice of producer, because there's an associative sort of value that you get from who you're using. But I think those guys are at the point now where I don't really think they need that anymore. I think Chad and the rest of the guys have a clear enough vision of what they want to sound like. I'm not sure if a producer really is necessary for them anymore.
I think it's good for them in that it strengthens that sort of inner circle with them, They're not a lot of bands, sometimes as they go further in their careers, the 4 members sort of drift a little bit from each other, and as more money comes along, they have more different interests, Whereas this band is sort of tightening itself together as they go further, which is nice to see. Holding themselves up in a barn out in nowhere to record a new record is a good sign that the resolve is quite strong still, and they even admitted themselves that they don't really need a state-of-the-art producer to help them record. They're bare bones rock and roll. They have 2 guitars, a bass, and drums, and that's it. So it's not complicated. They admit that themselves, and so they can do it themselves, and I think they like that.
When the new disc came out, every kid, you could hear it up and down the hallways through the, so they're big in Anna's. Every kid's got them.
When it first came out in town, it sold out really, really quickly. And somebody told me at one of the stores in town that somebody was driving by the town on the highway and heard that the new CD was being released and came into town to get one from Hannah, from the home of Nickelback.
What is nice about Nickelback is that they had the big album Silver Side Up, which is sort of a once in a lifetime deal, because it's not every album that will sell that many copies of in a band's career. Rather than sort of sit on their laurels, which they could easily have done, they toured it and they could have sat down and said, you know what, we don't have to put out another record right away. They went right into the studio and wanted to get a new album out for their fans, which is it's a nice message to their fans, because they're saying, you know what, if you're going to keep buying our records, we're going to keep giving you what you want for as long as you want. And I think that's going to continue.
Nickelback have never forgotten their prairie roots and schedule gigs in Alberta on their constant touring round the world.
All the kids from Hannah would go and watch them when they played in Calgary or Edmonton.
When they come back to Calgary or Red Deer or Edmonton, quite a lot of kids from here go and see them. And there's almost like a Hannah reunion now, and that grows and grows as they become more and more popular.
Yeah, Hannah's pretty proud of them. They're pretty special.
So the burning question is, what does the future hold for a multi-million selling rock band that are right at the top of their game?
Obviously, it's their time to shine, and at some point the shine will go off the nickel, and it won't be. We'll just see how thick the plating is. If it lasts, it lasts. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm sure that they're all going to have fine careers, beginning with the fact that they know how to invest their money and where to put it.
I think Chad's going to continue to listen to the popular eye, or popular ear, as it may be, and maybe tame their sound a little bit more, write more slow songs, maybe not as many hard rockers, but I think they'll be around for the years to come.
Now's the time to pass the blame.
I think the future bodes well for them, because their fans are not going to get any younger, I don't think. I think 4 albums in, they have a set fan base. They will garner newer fans, but at this point, the fans that they have now are going to grow with the band, because I think they have reached that stage where you have the fan who says, Nickelback's my band.
Like you can have bands on top for 10 years, like not even the rock field. It was Earth, Wind & Fire. They was on top for 10 years. And it's harder to stay on top. So that puts a lot of pressure on the band Nickelback. But then Chad, what's keeping them alive also is Chad writing songs and producing for other people. Like Spider-Man was huge. Now, if he did, another soundtrack like that on a big motion picture, it's gonna keep Nickelback in the light still. So they got a little different avenues of what they can use to keep the band out there.
They don't hide from the fact that they're just a straight up rock and roll band. And if they can sustain a career doing that, that's perfectly fine with them.
I think the future for Nickelback is whatever they want to make it. I think that Chad has proven that he can do some solo work and, obviously succeed at that. So I think that they're doing their side project kind of stuff. That's more Chad than the rest of the boys. I think that Nickelback's probably got another 2-3 albums in them at least. They're young, they're very talented, they're hungry still. And I was lucky enough to go into the studio at Greenhouse when they were recording The Long Road. And, when you listen to a song that they've recorded, with the guys, and you're just sitting there. Nobody's heard this song before, just them. And they just recorded this, and it just sounds great. Just to look in their face and see the excitement. They're not bored, and I think as long as the fans are still interested, Nickelback is always going to be around in one form or the next. I think I see bigger and better things for them. I don't think that Silver Side Up was their crowning glory. I think The Long Road is an apt title for a band that does have a long road ahead of them.
Speak to me fool.